What's going on, everybody? C4, welcome back to the channel, and today is the finale of our 2023 draft breakdown series for the Philadelphia Eagles, where we go position group by position group and talk about what prospects should fit nicely with the Philadelphia Eagles for each of their draft picks in this upcoming draft. And today, we are finishing combining defensive backs into one video. We're going to start with the corners, then we're going to look at the safety room. And looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, corner went from a massive need to more of a developmental need, if you will. Obviously, almost any team in the NFL, if there's an injury to one of their starters, they're probably going to be hurting a little bit, and I think that's an issue with the Philadelphia Eagles. It was an issue for them last year, and luckily, both Slay and Bradbury stayed healthy for the most part, so we didn't really have to worry about our depth being tested too much. And we brought in Greedy Williams for like a little bit more proven guy, and maybe Zach McPherson can do more with more reps. But corner went from like we have to almost hope that like a Christian Gonzalez or a Devin Witherspoon falls to us at 10 because we're going to not be able to keep both Slay and or James Bradbury. But the fact that we're able to retain both those guys gives us a little bit of leeway in terms of when we need to pounce on a corner. And we're also solid at the slot spot. But I think right now you want developmental players and adding depth players in this year's draft. So it became a little bit less of a priority for Philadelphia to strike early. So let's take a look at some of the top corners. I don't have literally everyone that I think I'd be interested. Corners usually a very, very deep class. Two guys that I just will mention right at the rip that I am not really going to highlight, but I do think could be value picks for the Philadelphia Eagles. You had Garrett Williams from Syracuse, had some injuries, but he's projected to be a day 3 pick. Terrell Smith from Minnesota, 6 feet tall, ran a 4.41, nice long developmental boundary type corner. And lastly, I think Eli Ricks from Alabama. He's had some off the field issues, hasn't really been on the field a whole lot, but there is a lot of potential there. Kind of reminds me of like when we drafted Jalen Mills out of LSU. Could be similar value in the 6th and 7th round. I also like Arquan Bush from Cincinnati. Not a great athlete, really solid football player. If he slips UDFA range, I'd be all over. But breaking down some corners, we're going to start with my favorite corner in this year's draft class, my corner 1, and that is Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the top 2 corners here because both these guys, I think, are gone before we even pick at pick 10. And even if they are available at pick 10, while I'd be personally comfortable taking them, it's still unlikely, I think, given that we brought both Slay and James Bradbury back, that we're going to make, at pick 10 a corner investment. But Devin Witherspoon, honestly, he's a perfect fit for the Philadelphia Eagles. He'd be a perfect fit for the fan base. He loves to hit. He's an absolute dog mentality. Nick Sirianni preaches that. He's an outstanding corner, 17 pass breakups, 3 interceptions last year at Illinois. There was some maybe concern about, he's undoubtedly the best tape, the best corner in the class, but maybe he would fall a little bit behind, say, Christian Gonzalez, who's a freak, Deonte Banks, who's a freak, Julius Brents, who's a freak. And, some teams might prioritize the athletic ability. He went out, ran a 4.45, which isn't freaky, but it was more than fast enough to kind of be like, what, it's lining up with what you're watching on tape. He is a good athlete. Maybe not an S-tier athlete, but probably A-tier, because there's never really too many issues of just him getting burned and beat over, deep. And stylistically, I'm not saying that he's a like for like, obviously different height, weight, speed type comparisons, but mentality-wise, style-wise, reminds me a lot of Sauce Gardner coming out of Cincinnati last year. I'm getting similar vibes, absolute alpha type corner, and that's kind of what I like at that position. So, honestly, if we draft him, he's probably not going to play until, who knows? So that's the question. It's almost like when we got Cam Jurgens last year. He is Kelsey's replacement. That's smart to have in the building, especially with Jason Kelsey going from a year-to-year basis. Is he going to retire? Is he not going to retire? However, if you have Kelsey who's coming back this year, there's still a chance Kelsey comes back next year, right? And then you're kind of, hopefully Jurgens can transition to guard. But if not, you're kind of still stuck in that waiting period. And sometimes getting depth that's more so a successor type role. And you're going to overvalue and overdraft a guy that you think is going to be your long-term starter at that position versus just drafting a developmental depth player. The waiting game could end up killing the value of that pick. And I think that needs to be talked about for both Devin Witherspoon and we got Christian Gonzalez, freak athlete out of Oregon. He's another guy that I think will be gone before top 10. In my opinion right now, my prediction, I do think that you will see the Detroit Lions should be in on one of these corners. I think maybe Devin Witherspoon could be more preferable to Dan Campbell. Christian Gonzalez could be there at 10. Outstanding athlete. I'm going to mention this now so I don't have to mention it for a bunch of players because we have a lot of athletes here. Sean Desai, Tariq Woolen, last year at Seattle. So there's an optimism and a belief that I think from maybe it's borderline a casual take that Sean Desai can develop these freak athlete corners into. Obviously, maybe he can't do it with every single one, and maybe there's a chance that Tariq Woolen is an anomaly. But I would like to think, given the background, that Sean Desai has had good success developing corners. Got a lot of Jalen Johnson when he was there in Chicago. Got a lot of Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant last season with the Seattle Seahawks. So someone like Chris Gonzalez, when you look at this athletic ability, this upside, 11 pass breakups, 4 interceptions last year as Oregon from a Colorado transfer. Man, it's almost one of those things. Imagine Chris Gonzalez with like prime time. Things could have overlapped there. That could have been badass. But he's going to be worthy of a top 10 pick. Might be gone, be even before our top 10 selection. But he'll be one of those names. If he's still there at pick 10, if we got a Christian Gonzalez, Bijan Robinson role, and he's only 20 years old, I'd be like, I don't know. It's a tough call because he's going in line with, say, if we drafted a Peter Skoronski or a Paris Johnson at pick 10. These are just going to be depth guys. We don't know when they're going to contribute in the field. Is that really what you want at pick 10 versus other teams that would draft those guys? Skoronski, Paris Johnson, Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon. Those guys are starting on pretty much any other team that's picking the top 10. Philly just has the luxury because we were in the Super Bowl and we have a top 10 pick. So, there's definitely a opportunity cost on the downside that you need to view investing pick number 10 in one of these corners. But I think they're both outstanding players, and I think easily you could justify the selection of those guys at 10. But it's unlikely. So moving on, what else could we look for? Now I'm going to kind of highlight some corners that could be available at 30, but it still goes in the same vein of we're going to be using a first-round pick on a guy that who knows when they're going to be seeing the field. We have Deonte Banks here, who's a perfect 10 res, 6 feet tall, 4.35, 42-inch vertical, 9 PBUs, only an interception last year. So maybe some concerns about the lack of production, but there is no concerns about the athletic ability. So if you're trying to find the Tariq Woolen, he's the Tariq Woolen, I think, in this year's draft class. Again, it's going to cost a lot. He might not even be there at 30. Do you want to invest a first-round pick on a guy that's going to, honestly, if it's... I hate talking about it because no one knows. But if Slay and Bradbury stay healthy again, he's not going to get on the field a whole lot. So, opportunity cost. Again, but a great player, and I think he matches up well with Sean Desai and how he's developed guys. We have Joey Porter Jr. Let's get up him next. He's likely, again, probably not going to be at pick 30. I'd be surprised. Pretty much all my mock drafts, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers drafting him right away. But another, corner that I think stylistically might be the best proven fit for a Sean Desai defense. 6'2", 193 pounds. Can play man. There is some concerns that he's going to be a little bit of a flag magnet, a little grabby. But he's height, weight, speed. 4'4", 6'2", very interesting prospect. Again, another guy that I at least put in the pool of if we somehow drafted him. Maybe trading down from pick 10, he's still there. Wouldn't hate it, but got to be a little bit concerned. So now let's talk about guys that are going to be available in the second round. And I feel like when you start talking about second round players, you get a little more optimistic that all right, these can be development. Second round guys, those can be the players that I have no problem whatsoever sitting behind Slay and Bradbury and letting them develop. And we're going to start with Julius Brents, who, his value's kind of all over the place. Right now he's projected on Dane Brugler going in the third round. I think he'll go in the second round. 45 tackles, 8 PBUs, 4 interceptions last year at Kansas State. He was a former Iowa transfer. And look at what we're working with here. 6'2", 41.5-inch vertical. When you see long-rangey corners, usually they don't have the agility grade to really match up. He does that in spades. 4.53. A lot of people were comparing him to Tariq Woolen, but Tariq Woolen ran 4.2. So it's a little bit different, but also, kind of the same. Almost a perfect 10 RAS. And I feel like, especially if he's there in the third round. This is a guy that has a safety background. I'd classify him as a defensive back. He is one of my favorite picks. I would almost overdraft him potentially in the second round because if you can view Juju Brents as a safety prospect as well as a corner, that's not going to get... if he's a safety, you're probably going to want to see him on the field sooner than later, given our safety room right now. But, and that's also Budda Baker. Come on, Howie. Budda Baker's available. He wants to come to Philly. Let's make it happen. But I think just Julius Brents, he's a developmental player, and the fact that you got two swings. He's either going to be, you can either make him as a corner, develop him as a corner, or a safety. I feel like there's a little bit of a luxury there. That there's a chance that if one position doesn't work out, there's another position that he can develop into. So I think there's a lot of value there, And if we're trusting kind of the mock draft consensus, he's there in the 3rd round. Easy pick for me. I would honestly wouldn't be upset if we got him in the 2nd round. Another 2nd round corner that I think is really interesting is Emmanuel Forbes, proven SEC ball hawk. If you can get over the size concern, 6 feet tall is not that bad. 166 pounds though, play strength is going to be an issue. But I do think he'll be a guy that you can just match him up. Just don't have him go up against the Mike Williams of the world. Kind of protect him a little bit and use him to his strengths. I'm not, it's one of those things where you stick this guy out there and you put him against a 220-pound wide receiver. The good things probably are not going to happen, especially if you have him get in that wide receiver's face. But if you can kind of mask that, you kind of can put him against the shiftier guys. I do think he's an outside corner. I don't think you have to worry about kicking him on the inside. He's a very good player. 5 interceptions in 2020, 3 interceptions 2021, 6 interceptions, 16 pass breakups last season. That production usually translates, especially in the SEC. So I do like Emmanuel Forbes. He's projected to go, maybe in the 2nd round. He could, surprisingly go in the 1st, but I do think at 166 pounds, that might be enough to push him into the 2nd round. I'd be very happy with that selection in the 2nd round. Other corners, now kind of, I don't think there's a lot of development you have to worry about there on Forbes' standpoint, but like kind of going with the Julius Brents area again of developmental corners, guys that we have no issue, developing and letting them sit behind Bradbury and Slay. We got Darius Rush, converted wide receiver out of South Carolina, 9 PBUs, 2 picks last season, and he's your athlete. 6'1", 4.36, straight line speed. He can run with pretty much anybody that was on tape last year at South Carolina. And I was surprised that, I thought all along, man, I was going to like Cam Smith. But the more I kind of, looked at it, Darius Rush might be the better of the two. I mean, 2 really, really solid South Carolina corners. Cam Smith should also go 2nd, 3rd round, somewhere in that range. But the athletic profile of Darius Rush, the background as a converted wide receiver, just the way that he tracks the ball, you can't teach a lot of those tendencies, a lot of those traits that he currently possesses. So I think as a developmental corner prospect, he's projected to go 2nd, 3rd round. Definitely one to keep an eye on. Another player that's underrated, Corey Trice Jr. out of Purdue. When I kind of looked at my corner rankings and lined them up, I had him as a top 10 corner. A lot of people have him, in that 10 to 15 range. Last season, 34 tackles, 12 PBUs, 2 interceptions. I just think just a really, really unique skill set here as a player that, can play a little bit of safety, but I think you're gonna put him on the outside of corner and utilize that length at 6'3", 4.47 is plenty enough speed. Has lots of agility. So you obviously could probably bring him down and use him as a big slot if you needed to, especially if the other teams are lining up tight ends and stuff like that in the slot. Just a really enticing player. A lot of good traits. Versatility. If we're talking about Julius Brents, potentially, corner safety, you get 2 swings at it. Maybe get a little bit with Corey Trice as well out of Purdue. So I think his current projection is in that 3rd round bubble as well. And I think that's going to be the sweet spot if Philadelphia doesn't get Brian Branch. And we'll talk about him when we break down the safeties. That's going to be the sweet spot. 3rd, 4th round for us to land a defensive back. All right, we got Keely Ringo. You want to talk about developmental players? This is a guy that, I don't know. I thought I was actually going to hate him more than, and not necessarily hate, but I was going to be lower on him when all is said and done. But, I still had him as a top 50 player. I'm going to publish my top 50 board over on the main channel tonight. And he literally was number 50. And it's a traits league. 6'1", 200 pounds, 4.36. The explosion and agility showed up on tape. He literally got picked on. I will never not remember the SEC championship game where, there was literally all game LSU was picking on them. LSU starting quarterback Jaden Daniels got knocked out of the game. They had to play their backup quarterback, and their backup quarterback was just stunting and dunking all over Keely Ringo. It was not ideal, but anytime you have a guy that has these kind of traits, height, weight, speed, I would say just where I follow him, I think he's a very enticing prospect. I think he also can put him in that, maybe might move to safety, and you can kind of hide some of that agility and some of those tight hips, but 2 swings at it. 2 swings at a height, weight, speed, defensive back. Those are always going to be enticing. But there's, right now he's currently projected to go late 1st, early 2nd round. It's a little rich for my blood, but if he does fall a little bit into the 2nd round, maybe has a little bit of a Nakobe Dean-like fall, wouldn't hate it. Plus, the Eagles have brought him in for a visit. Hey, let's see. What else we got? We got Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami, the last of kind of the height, weight, speed corners in this year's class that's going to go 2nd, 3rd round in that bubble and not so much late project type players. Stevenson, 25 tackles, 9 PBUs, 2 picks last year for the Miami Hurricanes, 6 feet tall, 4.45, great in the explosion. I just think you get a guy that is, you got length, you got speed, you got a guy that can pretty much press man against anybody. It's going to be interesting. There's still a lot of trying to decipher what the Philadelphia Eagles defense is really going to look like next season. But I do think press man corners are going to be somewhat valued, more so than maybe just zone guys, soft zone coverage guys. And I think that's going to be a little bit of the difference from the Vic Fangio sticks defense. I think we might see a little bit more man, a little bit more our corners getting in their face, which I guarantee Slay and Bradbury are going to like. I think Tyreek Stevenson could fit that mold. He's projected to go second, third round. So that is something to keep an eye on. A sleeper for me in this draft class, we got Mekhi Garner. He was a transfer going to Louisiana State, height, weight, speed. That's kind of, the last three players I'm talking about are going to be guys that are going to be available into day 3 that are height, weight, speed, developmental players that you are not going to be upset if you let them sit and wait. And I think that that's exactly what you get here in Garner, where it's like, all right, if it takes 2 years for him to get in on the field, if he's just purely a depth type player, you're not going to be too upset about that. It's not going to require a big investment. I think you can probably get him in the 5th round, maybe even the 6th round. We have Art Green out of Houston. He's projected to be round 6, round 7, 6'1", 4.36. You know why we're talking about him. We also have Emir Speed from Michigan State, 6'3", running a 4.34. That's just, this is one of those ones where it's like you feel this confidence for Jeff Stoutland for developing freak athletic tackles, and I kind of want to just have that same kind of vibes that's what Sean Desai is going to be able to do on the defensive side of the ball. Last year's Speed, 62 tackles, 5 PBUs at Michigan State as a former Georgia Bulldog. So you already know Georgia Bulldogs, pretty much every one of their players are freak athletes. And we got Jalen Jones from A&M, 6'2", long, lengthy. He's long. He got good length at the cornerback spot. And another day 3 selection. Those are kind of guys you want to kind of focus on, long-rangey athletes. But moving on to the safeties. This is a 2-for type video. We are going to start with the best safety, head and shoulders above the rest in this year's draft class, and that is Brian Branch from Alabama. Easy first-round grade. I think right now, like in my head, if we have a dream mock draft for the Eagles, dream draft for the Eagles, look, vision it with me. Pick 10, some team wants to trade it for a quarterback. Will Levis or something like that is still there, or C.J. Stroud or Anthony Richardson. Philly can trade back a couple spots. Keep imagining this. Couple spots, not a lot. Couple spots to pick up a second-round pick. Okay? We get Bijan Robinson at, in the teens. And then at 30, Brian Branch is still there. We get Brian Branch. And then into the second round, we grab an edge rusher. I don't know. Get creative with who's there. The other second-round pick, we get Jack Campbell, a linebacker. We're just starting to get guys, great athletes, great profiles, ability to start right away. That's exactly what you get with Brian Branch. Our safety room right now is incredibly suspect. I like Reed Blankenship as much as the next guy. I would like to be optimistic that what we saw last year is good enough to be a serviceable starter. We're kind of throwing everything else at the wall here. Justin Evans was a former high-round pick. Maybe there's something there. Terrell Edmonds comes over the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's solid, but limited ceiling. I think it's fair to say from what we've seen in his time with Pittsburgh, unless a new scheme unlocks his untapped potential as a former first-round pick. So I think it is wise for the Philadelphia Eagles to address the safety position sooner than later in this year's draft. Brian Branch is going to require a first-round pick, but he literally would be a like-for-like replacement for what we got for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and how we utilize Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He's a better tackler than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. 90 tackles, 14 TFLs, 3 sacks, 9 PBUs, 2 picks last year as a first-team All-American. Not a great athlete, which kind of go against how he rose from the last couple of years. We've been borderline just drafting good athletes. But he is such a good football player, very well-rounded. Maybe not the highest ceiling. Maybe you might cap his ceiling a little bit because he's not a freak athlete. But what you're getting right now is a pro-ready player that's going to be a starter in the league for 10 years. That's kind of what we need. That's kind of stability I would like at that safety spot. But I say all this before we can break down our safeties here. We'll go a little bit quicker. But just get Budda Baker. That's our safety. That should be our safety pick. Budda Baker. Let's go. My second safety in the class is Jair Brown from Penn State. He was the one player that I was shocked at his testing. I thought he would be. Penn State's another one of those schools that just has a lot of freak athletes, much like Georgia. Didn't test as freaky. Improved his numbers at the pro day, ran a 4.58 at the pro day. 35-inch vertical at his pro day, but those are pro day numbers. They're usually inflated a little bit. But Jair Brown is an exciting, awesome player. Dane Brugler has him going in the third round. This is one of my dream picks. If we don't get Brian Branch in the first, say we go that exact same scenario, we trade down, get Bijan Robinson, then say at 30, we get a developmental pass rusher. Going into the second round, whatever we got. If Jair Brown's there in the third round, I think there's a lot of upside potential for him. Big-time thumper, can play against the run, ball hawk, 10 picks the last 2 years at Penn State. Very good football, but one of my favorite players in this class, New Jersey kid. I think he'd be an awesome fit for the Philadelphia Eagles. We got J.L. Skinner. Unique body type. Not a huge thumper, but also can lay the lumber. Maybe a little bit reckless of a tackler, but at 6'3", 209 pounds, can play center field a little bit as well. 8 PBUs, 4 picks last season at Boise State. Just really interesting size. And given, what Sean Desai had last year at Seattle, that's always been a team that's prioritized size. He had some success with Ryan Neal, who's kind of similarly built, 6'3", 200 pounds. He might fall a little bit. He had an injury. I don't know what it was. I think it was like a shoulder injury, something like that, prevented him from testing this offseason. So maybe that might affect his value a little bit. It's a weak safety class, though, however, and guy with traits like this might go earlier than later. But right now, he's currently projected to go in that third, fourth round sweet spot. So if we miss out on Brian Branch, I think Skinner's size is very intriguing. We have Jamie Robinson from Florida State. Now, he is just good football player. Not going to wow everyone with his athletic ability. Even though, some solid numbers in there. The 3-cone was good. But I just think absolute dog type player, would fit the mentality. I think he'd be a guy that Nick Sirianni would fall in love with if they ever got in the same room with one another. 99 tackles, 6 PBUs, and an interception last year. 2 years ago, 2021, he had 4 interceptions on 7 PBUs, 7 TFLs for Florida State. Just a versatile player who's kind of built like a slot a little bit, but I think ultimately... and even Dane Brugler comped him to Jalen Petrie a little bit. And I love Jalen Petrie. He was my number 1 safety last season out of Baylor. So kind of a poor man's not the same athlete as Jalen Petrie, but a very versatile. I think he will be a productive safety at the next level. He's also in that third to fourth round range. Wouldn't have a problem with Skinner, Robinson, or Jair Brown in that spot. We have Sidney Brown, the Canadian. If you can get over missed tackles. And unfortunately, that is usually one thing that's not correctable. Sometimes there's some things that people will commonly bring up for talking about draft prospects, and they'll be like, well, that's correctable. They'll get that right at the next level. Usually you don't have guys that miss a lot of tackles in college that clean that up. It's just kind of something that follows them. But from an athletic standpoint, the pros that he can bring on top of the missed tackles, he's a ball hawk, he's a ridiculous athlete. Those are really, really nice traits for a guy that's going to be available early in day 3. Sidney Brown, 59 tackles, 13 PBUs, 6 interceptions last season for Illinois. And maybe there's just a little bit Canada bias, but I'd be a big fan of bringing him in. We have another good athlete here in Daniel Scott out of Cal, 994 on the Raz. An interesting developmental player, currently projected to go 4th, 5th round. 85 tackles, 7 PBUs, 3 interceptions last season for Cal. Tested very well. Looked pretty smooth at the combine as well. He was one of those guys that was like, okay, I kind of heard about him a little bit, but stood out at the combine even before he did all these testing. So I think he's an intriguing player with some upside, more to developmental, probably would contribute on special teams earlier in his career. But anytime you can stack some athlete like this in your secondary, as long as you have a good developer, you like to gamble on the traits. We have Azizi Hearn out of UCLA, another solid athlete to potentially consider. You have Shamari Connor, safety out of Virginia Tech, really nice athlete. I think he played like a little bit of like a hybrid linebacker spot. He's a former 4-star recruit. He's had some big-time numbers throughout his career at Virginia Tech. Over 300 tackles, 21 TFLs, 23 PBUs. Solid athlete as well, and I just think he's more of a special teamer, nickel-type role, and we can always use more depth. We did not like Josiah Scott coming in on the field when Avonte Maddox missed time last year. And then lastly, maybe not the most exciting pick, but maybe the safest pick for these non-first-round safeties is Jordan Battle out of Alabama. 2-time second-team All-American, 2-time first-team All-SEC. Didn't test the best, but you're getting a guy that maybe not have the highest ceiling, but I think along the lines of Brian Branch, you could see him starting. He kind of, honestly, if I had to give him vibes as related to the Eagles, like a TJ Edwards, a guy that just goes super late, but it's only a matter of time. He'll grind on special teams and could very well be a starter someday and get that big second contract in the NFL. He's projected to go in the 3rd round as well in that sweet spot. So, the kind of guy that just he's good at everything. Maybe not great at every specific, but he's solid in coverage. He's calm in coverage. He can tackle well. He can lay the lumber if he needs to. Just obviously don't put him in the slot and have a matchup against shiftier players with his low agility and explosion grade. So those are the safeties. Those are the corners that I think would be very intriguing for the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Who are your favorite players at those positions? And that will do it, man, here on the More C4 channel leading up to the draft. I'm going to react. I'm going to stream first round tomorrow night on the main channel. I'm going to have Eagles reaction to the first round picks on the main channel. I'll probably have reactions to the second round picks, especially if Philly trades back and we get a couple seconds. That'll go on the main channel, but like day 2, late day 2, all of my day 3 reactions are going to be here on More C4. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Hit that subscribe button if it's your first time stopping by. And I'll see you guys back in the next one. Till then, C4 saying peace out.